Hey, how's it going, everybody? Andy Pride here with Milk and Cookies Total War, bringing you another first-person replay commentary for Rome 2. Today, I'll be on Royal Scythia, and nomadic factions don't get played a whole lot, especially not on patch 15. They are weaker than a lot of the other factions in the game. I think Thrace, or the Undersea Kingdom, and the Nomads are probably some of the worst factions. Ayers touched on them a little bit in a video that he did recently. He talked about the strengths and weaknesses of Royal Scythia, Masagatai, and Roxolani, and all the nomadic factions in general. Of course, they are very limited in what they're able to accomplish, but in 3v3s and 2v2s, they definitely have their own place. In a 1v1, they're very easily counterpicked, and it becomes very difficult to destroy your opponent in a 1v1. But they are much more creative and flexible with their tactics, not with their army compositions, but with their tactics in a 2v2 or 3v3 battle, because they have such high mobility. So, one thing that's interesting about nomadic factions, and one thing that I always try to do with them, of course, you can engage your opponent head-on in melee combat. Like, if I just took all my cavalry right now, I have a bunch of Scythian Royal Horse, and I'll talk about the Amazonian Riders in a minute here, but you can't just run at your opponent. There are factions like Rome, where you can literally just right-click your opponent, and if you just out-micro them a little bit, put your infantry in the right position, you're going to be able to just run over them. You can't do that with Royal Scythia or Masagatai, because cavalry, in general, on patch 15, is worse than it has been on previous patches. Now, of course, cataphracts and melee horses and much of others, they're still strong units, and they can be utilized extremely effectively and rack up ridiculous amounts of kills. The problem with it is that bracing and Pila can both destroy cavalry units. So if I took a Scythian Royal Horse right now, which would be able to destroy an armored legionnaire from behind and just ran them directly into them from the front, they're going to take a Pila volley to the face, be really sad, and the high armor of the Avocati or the armored legionnaire is going to outlast that melee horse in combat. So again, you cannot, and it's obvious, but I just want to make it clear to any newer players, you cannot just run at your opponent with any of the nomadic factions. They're all cavalry. You have to be very wary of spears, very wary of high armored units in general, and wary of other cavalry. Now, one thing that I love about Royal Scythia in general are the Amazonian Riders, and they came with the Daughters of Mars DLC pack, and they are, I believe, the only horse archer unit in the game that has 150 range. And as you see, I've done a little bit of skirmishing so far, not done a ton of damage to my opponent here, but they are the only horse archer unit in the game with 150 range, and that makes them really quite useful. Now, I don't know that they're the best horse archer unit in the game. There are, of course, better ones in melee combat. These are very light armored. They do get wrecked by enemy skirmish units if you're just standing still. But the cool thing about it is that you can focus fire, run in, and with that extra range, you're not really in the cone of fire of enemy skirmishers for that long. With a lot of the horse archers, they have 125 range, so you have to run up much closer, and you're in the cone of fire for that much longer, and usually that's going to lead to you taking a volley. They don't have to stay in that cone of fire for very long because they have the same amount of range, so they can be utilized really effectively. I think they're a really fun, cool unit. Definitely adds some uniqueness to the Royal Scythians. Now, another thing that I was pretty happy about on patch 15, like I said, cavalry has been nerfed a little bit. I'm not happy about that, because I do love cavalry, and I always have in Medieval 2, Shogun 2. I was a big fan of cavalry factions and units that were really strong cavalry. But one thing that I was really happy about was that they actually took Draco off of Roman units. This might have been patch 14, actually. They took Draco, which is a military standard that was basically a dragon, and historically, I believe, was used by either the Sarmatians or the Dacians. I'm not sure if historians actually know exactly who the Romans took it from, but the Draco standard was used originally by either the Sarmatians or the Dacians, and it wasn't traditionally a Roman military insignia. So I'm glad they added it to the cavalry units for the Scythians, and I believe a couple of the other nomadic factions in the game. I am glad that happened because it gives them anti-cav bonuses and it makes them a stronger unit. So we're now in melee combat here. I haven't done anything yet. It's these are all AVA clan members, by the way. We're just kind of beginning this melee engagement in earnest here. Rome is engaged a little bit of militia hoplite here, and actually torn up some of these militia hoplites. But yeah, the engagement between Pontus and Athens is beginning in earnest here, and it's weird because with, like I said, I couldn't engage Rome from the front here. He has a bunch of really high armored units. He has a bunch of skirmishers. He has some spears and some cavalry. So one thing that I really like to do when I'm playing a nomadic faction is I'll set up my army in front of my opponent and make him think that I just want to tie him down, and then quickly, just out of nowhere, I'll pull a bunch of my guys away and attempt to attack a different part of the line. Now, I haven't quite done that yet. I am going to do that relatively soon, but I did see a citizen cav unit here that I just got a free charge off of, and I'll be able to wipe that out very easily with the Steppe Noble Lancers. These aren't the elite tier melee cav for the Scythians, but should be able to clear this up very quickly. But what I like to do is I'll make my opponent think that I want to engage them from the front, and then I'll quickly shift all of my cavalry over to another flank and try to double team another player. Now the problem with this is that it usually leaves one of your allies on an island. In a 2v2 it's not as big an issue. In a 3v3 it definitely can be. So when I finally decide to pull away from this engagement and go all the way over to Macedon, which will happen relatively soon, it's going to leave Athens kind of on an island. So the way you kind of prevent them from getting completely wrecked is you leave a couple units that still make the Roman player, whoever's across from you, kind of wary of those units, and they don't want to commit everything to the fight. If I pulled all of my cavalry away from this fight, went over to Macedon, that would be a huge issue for Athens, because Rome would just be able to roll up on the flank, kind of like he's doing now, and just destroy Athens here. So you have to leave some units in reserve, so that when he does commit units to Athens, I can hammer and anvil and help out my ally here. But as you can see, I am pulling some of my units away. I haven't done a lot with my melee cavalry yet, but they are going to make a huge impact on this battle as we go forward. My Amazonian riders haven't done a whole lot. They've basically just been kind of whittling away a little bit at my opponent. The problem is I wasn't able to flank them around yet, so they're not going to be getting shots off on really important targets. They're going to be hitting stuff from the front, so that's not exactly ideal, but it is what's going to be happening here. In this melee engagement, I'm going to be taking on an Evocati cohort for a little bit, and there was an enemy cav unit in this as well, I believe. Oh, never mind, that's the Athenian citizen cav. But, yeah, I did manage to pull my Scythian Royal Horse through here. My usage of them, this particular unit in general, was not great. I killed some slingers, but trading an entire Scythian Royal Horse for half a slinger unit was pretty bad, so that was not a great usage there. But as you can see, Rome is rolling up on the flank of my Athenian player, and he's actually in trouble. But Egypt, on the other hand, is doing extremely well over on his side of the battlefield. He got some Ptolemaic cavalry into the back of the Macedonian player, and just in general, he's winning melee fights with the thorax swords against hoplites. They'll be able to win that. And some Sobek cultists for the extra morale penalty. And then, of course, my cavalry as well. I'm going to be pulling over here. So, looking at it now, it does seem like I left Athens on an island, and I did leave some units in the rear here, and I am going to commit them relatively soon. But Athens just got rolled up on the flank, and I wasn't able to help him as much as I wanted to. Maybe one problem that I did notice was that I kept a lot of my guys on fire at will, and that's really good in some situations. Well, I kept it on for too long, and they started shooting at units that were already routing, and that's obviously a complete waste of ammo for them, so I should not have done that. That was a mistake from me. I lost an entire volley from my Royal Skirmishers and an entire volley from one of my Horse Archers, and another one right here, so, I mean, they're shooting at a unit that's already basically routing, so not great for me there. I did manage to pull a Scythian Royal Horse and get them into these slingers in the back. I'm going to pull them out as this legionary cav tries to catch up. But I have not made a huge impact on this battle yet, to be honest. Athens did kind of get rolled over, and I'm not sure that I supported him as well as I should have. And then Egypt on the other flank managed to destroy Macedon pretty heavily. So one thing that's cool about the nomads is that the later the battle goes, I feel like the stronger they get. And what I mean by that is when enemy units start to get wary and exhausted, the charges from melee cavalry and cataphracts get particularly powerful. And of course they aren't able to run their units around as much as they would like to because they're exhausted. So you have an even bigger speed bonus here. So I did put all of my Horse Archers here, and I just tried to just start shooting at some of these units, get some of the hoplites off the field before I actually start hammering and ambling. His chariots were an issue for Athens. I didn't really touch on them too much, but they tore through a bunch of the Athenian infantry in the center. And so I wanted to focus fire them. I managed to kill 1 or 2 chariots in that volley. And he's going to try to pull away. So I pulled my general and my Scythian royal skirmishers around the flank, and now is when I'm going to be able to really start making a big impact on this battle. Athens is basically gone, maybe has a couple units left. Rome has a lot of his army left, Pontus has a little bit left, so I'm going to get my skirmishers in the middle here, and then flank my cavalry all the way around. And what I kind of wanted to do here was bait like I was going for the middle, and then pull around, because this right here is a very isolated target for me. So one thing we did was we took out this legionary cohort, or we're trying to, and that should go relatively easily. We have a bunch of cavalry completely surrounding them, so a couple of hammer and anvil should be enough to completely make them sad. And yeah, just repeated hammer and anvils on these guys when they're so isolated is going to be pretty easy kill there. So don't want to leave them melee too long, because they are high armor, are high melee attack, but again, multiple charges should make that unit rout. And then I'm pulling a bunch of these Hastati and some of these other units away from the melee fight, and then I'm going to loop them around and start hammer and anviling on other parts of the line. So it was a mistake, I think, for Granitor here. He's playing as Rome to isolate these units. If you look at where his army is right now, a lot of it is in the center here, and I think that's good. I think he needed to be more compact against a faction like Royal Scythia. I think he's kind of spread out too much and allowed himself to get isolated. And now we're going to get charges into the flanks of these legionary cohorts, and I'm gonna start racking up a lot of kills on these Scythian Royal Horse, for sure. So this entire flank is basically gonna rout after some more hammer and anvils, and then I'm trying to get my skirmishers into a more threatening position as well. The problem is that, again, I did waste some of my ammo, so I think some of these units are already out of ammunition, and that means that I'll have to start using them as cavalry. And with the tiny charge bonus that they have, only 4 charge bonus and the tiny armor, they're not great. They will kill things if you hammer and anvil with them, but it's not really the best unit to be using as dedicated cavalry. These units have not quite yet routed, and so I decided that I was going to pull the rest of these guys over here, and my Scythian Royal Horse are going to charge into the back of, I believe, that Hastati. I think I'm gonna move them over here. And we should get a nice little close-up of this hammer and anvil. Will be completely devastating to a unit with low armor like Hastati are. So really good charge there, and of course I had a nice anvil to protect them as well, so that unit got completely shredded and should rout relatively soon. But look at the balance bar. Like, the balance bar I don't think is really reflective of how this battle is going. I would say that we're not in the best position at the moment because my guys are starting to get ground down, but so are the Romans. And the cool thing about the Nomads is they really do have the ability to cause complete mass routes and chain routes with their hammer and anvils. And they don't have any, the enemy doesn't have any cavalry left on the field, so I really am able to commit my cavalry wherever I need to. And this flank right here should rout relatively soon. So I did try to get at, I believe, a skirmish unit and a legionary cohort in the middle here. This was kind of a silly engagement for me to take. With all these hoplites and high armored units, they weren't really going to do much in melee combat. So I probably should have pulled them out a little bit earlier. But yeah, they're going to get beat up. And I'll pull them out. So now it's just going to be about patience. And winning this battle is going to be obviously extremely difficult looking at the balance bar and what our opponents have, but disregarding the balance bar for a second, I really do think at this point in the battle that I had a chance to win it. And that might have been silly for me to think, but just looking at what they had, they didn't have a bunch of dedicated spears left. They had lost their general. Both the Pontic and the Roman general are dead, and I believe my general is still alive because I was still using Second Wind and Battle Rhythm, which I think is pretty important to use on a melee general or a cataphract general or any cavalry general in general, is to use Second Wind, because cavalry, when they don't become exhausted, they're just super effective in melee combat, and with the repeated hammer and anvils, it just rack up ridiculous amounts of kills. So again, I'm going to be doing that, just charging into a bunch of these sword units and then pulling out as soon as I do. So yeah, I'm going to charge into the front of this legionary cohort here. This is where I kind of had to start committing units into the front of their swords. Was able to isolate this Balearic Slinger, which means getting that off the field will be a big deal. and then gonna have to pull out. Fortunately, that's a pike unit, so because they have such weird movement orders, I'm gonna be able to pull out a little bit easier than I normally would. But I'm starting to get ground down as well, and the balance bar is shifting even further in their favor. But while all these units are tied up, looking at my Scythian Royal Horse, I thought I was going to charge that in, but apparently I didn't. This is the kind of thing, though, right here that he's doing right now, that you shouldn't be doing against cavalry factions. When you chase after cav units and allow your swords to get isolated, that's when you start getting broken down chunk by chunk. And like this unit at 102 men, if it was with the rest of the army, it'd be fine. But because he let it get isolated, it's going to get charged and it's in red morale and going to rout soon. So when you're in a situation like this in a 1v1 or 2v2 against a nomadic faction, definitely don't let your units get caught out like that. Keep them compact, keep your army close together, and it makes it so much harder for cavalry factions to just come in and wreck you with charges. So yeah, they're going to die. And I'm going to pull out as another Evocati comes. And yeah, at this point, I'm not going to be able to win this. But I have always been very dedicated to getting as many kills as I possibly can in situations like this. So there are two minutes still left in this battle. And, I mean, they still don't really have anything that can really stop my Scythian Royal Horse from running over their army. Obviously, repeated hammer and anvils will make them die over time. The Pila throw, the HP lowering over time is going to make me start losing these cavalry units, but still going to do as many charges as I can before this battle is over. So I did notice that this Valerius Slinger was also isolated, so pull them around the flank of the hoplite and get them into melee combat. It's funny here because I kind of got hung up on the chariots as well, or maybe not. I don't know if dead chariots actually have a hitbox or not. That'd be interesting to see if they can actually block units from moving. But I pulled through, got out of that legionary cohort, routed the Valerius Slinger, and gonna rout some of them off the field. And again, still charging these sword units in the back here. So I mean, given the situation that I was in, with so much of his army still intact, I think I did pretty well with these hammer and anvils. Well, at this point it's not hammer and anvils, with these charges. Did a lot of damage, and I'm still working on it right now. Up to 170 kills there. And going to be committing them to one final charge into the legionary cohorts over here as well. So let's watch this one. He's not going to brace, which means, of course, the charge is going to be more efficient and effective here. But it is going to be in the spears as well. And at this point, they're going to start wavering, so I was like, I'm not going to pull them out again because they'll just rout. I'm going to leave them in melee as long as I can. See what kind of killing they can do. But yeah, at this point, battle was definitely over. And my general's the only unit left. Going to leave them in melee as well. And this battle will wrap up. So, I think Air is right when he says that the Nomad factions are certainly very easily countered. I mean, if you think about any faction that brings a bunch of heavily armored spears with some cavalry, that's going to be a pretty good counter. Now, of course, you don't want to engage in a cavalry fight without support from spears against the Nomad tribes, because you will lose, especially against Royal Scythia with the Draco. That bonus first cavalry that you get from Draco just completely shreds enemy cavalry when you use it effectively at the right time. So you don't want to just take a excuse me. You don't want to just take a cav fight versus Royal Scythia or Masagatai for sure. They have the best cavalry units in the game. But if you have spears next to them, and you can kind of blunt the charge with a spear unit, and then back up the cavalry with some spears, yeah, you're going to be in really good shape against them. My tactic with these factions is, like I said, generally to present a couple of units in front of the enemy army, and then shift a bunch of my other units over to the other side and double team one of my opponents. And what this allows you to do is, because they're so mobile, you can double team your enemy much quicker than they can double team your ally. Usually, because you have that mobility advantage, you have all cavalry. So you quickly double team your opponent and try to rout them before your ally gets routed. And by the ally that you have that gets routed, and I realize I'm being a little convoluted now, I mean like what happened to Athens in this battle. He kind of got left on an island, and that was my fault, but also I kind of had to do that because I could not engage Rome from the front. So I left a couple of units in the back to just kind of hammer and anvil any units that did engage Athens, and the rest I shifted over to the other side. So it's a gambit. It does not always work, as it didn't in this battle. It can be a real issue. Athens really didn't get very many kills at all because he kind of got isolated. But again, I think that's kind of a necessary tactic to use with the nomads because most of the time, if your opponent brings a good army, you cannot just charge straight into your opponent. It just doesn't work. So it has to be combined infantry and cavalry tactics with another one of your allies. So yeah, I mean, I had ridiculous stats this game. Like 700 losses. Obviously, I had a much smaller army. 1,600 kills. Did very well. Macedon had a hard time. And then, of course, Rome. Army set up Ibra was OP. But it was a really fun battle, and I think that I handled myself relatively well. I definitely made some mistakes with the fire of will, keeping that on for the entire battle, because I lost some important volleys. But I don't think I did anything that lost us the battle. And I mean, I did the majority, or not the majority, but a large percentage of the killing in this battle. So was really fun, and I really do just love using the nomadic factions because having an army that's completely made up of cavalry is just fun for me. You just having a mobility advantage over your opponent is always fun, in my opinion. And I really enjoy using them, even though I think they are some of the weaker factions in the game right now. But I hope you guys enjoyed, and there's some big news coming to you guys relatively soon. I don't know if you'll care or not, but I'll be talking about that probably in the next couple of days after this this replay gets uploaded. So I'll bring that up soon, and I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll talk to you all later. Any Pride signing out.